Thank you very much. Go on, Neil.
I
Go
was
at it.
responding to that point that came in towards the end from Dimitrita. I hope that's the right pronunciation regarding what sounds like a grammar-based syllabus. Um,
Yeah,
and also in response to certain things that the learners have to do. So she writes, they need to know how to use, and that's interesting in itself, the present perfect continuous, past perfect, passive voice, and others by the end of the eighth grade. Um, I'm sitting here and riling with the
me
education
too.
authority that has laid that down.
Yes.
But of course, the reality is that for most teachers around the world, that is going to be the reality. How do
I don't know whether most teachers have to suffer that. Um, what I do think is that we should be standing up and being to be counted where that's concerned. I mean, eighth graders doing all of those aspects. I mean, it's just not reasonable. Not
mm,
only is it not reasonable, it's not useful either.
yeah,
I'd like to just pop down to homework from Gulnora. Homework is revision, what they learned in class. Here we find whether we gained our goals or not. It's an interesting idea, but I don't think that, certainly not in my case anyway, it doesn't work like that. Homework for me is a place for students to develop their own ideas. I don't check homework. I know most teachers do, but I've never checked homework unless a student asks me to. I have students look at each other's homework. So for me, it's not a matter of revision. It's not a matter of proving what they've learned. It's a matter of development. That's all.
Philip, what about you and homework? Where do you stand on this?
Well, I would go along, with Stephen that and thinking it's a way of linking a previous lesson to the next lesson. So it is trying to consolidate what has been learnt in a previous lesson, but there's also that link when we talk about flipping, was part for me, was part of the homework, was preparation for the next lesson. So when the next lesson then starts, I often have the students that are together reviewing what we learned in the previous session, but then they're also ready and prepared to go into this session. And I like that rolling, rotating. So we're going maybe two steps back or one step forward or one step back, one step forward. It's a continuous process. I
Uh,
do. I mean, I use this flipping of lessons a lot, really, this preparation. So they know what we're doing. And I think it's really good when it has happened very rarely. I must admit that I have been late because of traffic problems, and you enter a classroom and they're doing their lesson. They've started, we're going, we almost don't need you to be there. We're getting on with what they've prepared, and you quietly sneak in then and just listen to what's going on.
yeah. I
Gulnora's
just
following that up. Oh,
sorry, yeah, I just want to pop to Gulnora.
mm.
I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. How do you review? Uh, and then later we need your suggestion, maybe doing it wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. Nobody's doing anything wrong. And that's really the whole point of this session. The whole point of this session was to get people to think about their approach. As long as your approach is coherent with what you're doing in the classroom, you're not doing anything wrong. If you beat your students, I might suggest that you are doing something wrong. But okay, so how do you review? Well, the way that I do review is every single moment that we're in class, I'm reviewing.
Yeah.
I'm constantly listening, watching, challenging. There's a word that didn't come up in this particular session, and perhaps it should have done, because it's an extremely important part of the whole. So I don't believe in language tests, which may be a bit radical. I think that everything that we do in the classroom is to promote some kind of development, which is reviewed by them, by me, by all of the interested parties. If I might just pop ahead to Arwa has said praising students important. people can.
Steve,
Sorry, go on. Yeah, I just
can I
wanted to
just
respond to
suggest
that
that
before it
before
disappears.
we
Yeah,
move
go on.
on to that,
Yeah,
because it's
go
a
on.
really interesting
Yeah,
point, perhaps
yeah,
if to respond further to Gulnora, you've talked about the fact that everything is a review, and I
yeah.
think what Gulnora is also perhaps interested in is some sort of suggestions for actually how to turn that into techniques. So I was going to add, for example, I'm a great believer in exit tickets, which very simply can be giving students, depends on the number of students you have in the room. It can be done online, it can be done with post-it notes. You ask the students to identify, as long as they're old enough to be able to reflect, what three things did you learn today? And that can be very enlightening. Or what were the two things that you learned most today? And what was something that's still unclear? In other words, for me, review, it's not so much what you do as getting visible the learning process. So our learning outcomes should be aligned to demonstrable student acts of learning, not by the end of today you will know about, but by
Yeah.
the end of today you will demonstrate, you will rank, you will list if it's a vocabulary lesson, so that you can see the learning taking place. The learners can see the learning taking place, and ideally this is happening throughout the lesson and potentially for homework as well. But yes, much as Philip has been saying, my view is that in terms of spaced repetition, we may not set homework to review what was done in the lesson. So today's Friday. Let's imagine it's Thursday. I might not set homework for the content of Thursday's lesson on Thursday evening. I might ask for some of the homework to be a review of Wednesday or Tuesday's learning for spaced repetition. And then, yes, to look forward, maybe give them a video to watch, which introduces communicatively a grammar structure that they might be looking at. But they're not learning the present perfect, they're learning to talk about life experience. Does
Mhm.
that make sense? What, Philip?
I think that's a really important point there. But yes, you're not learning the grammar point present perfect. Have plus the past participle per se. You're learning, as you say, to talk about your life experience in this usage of the present perfect. It's much more practical, it's much more useful to be able to talk about experiences you've had in your life, than to know that, oh, that's called the present perfect. I never knew what a present perfect was before I started teaching English, and English is my
You didn't
native
know that
tongue.
you didn't know the name of it, you mean, don't you?
Yes, exactly. Sorry, yes, yeah. I
Okay.
did. Nobody told me that is called
No,
a present perfect. I mean,
absolutely, because there's no reason to know that.
yeah,
It's a
and
categorization it's a handy categorization, but that's all really.
And I think it's the same for students. Our second language learners will be seeing on such a regular basis in course books present perfect simple, present perfect continuous. And part of me just wants to rip it all out and actually go, you know what? Rubbish. I don't care if you can never talk about the present perfect simple continuous. I just want you to be able to talk about your experiences or processes that you're going through.
Let's just spend a second or two on unpicking that, because this is you'll forgive me, Neil, but that's another example of we as teachers thinking we know what students want. And there are some students who actually will need. I mean, the difference between actinic and synoptic is what I'm talking about. Actinic students are people who want to know the mechanisms, they want the nitty-gritty, they want the nuts and bolts. And synoptic students are people who don't care and will just dive in and get on with it. And so what you're suggesting, Neil, is great for synoptic students, but it's going to leave, I suggest it's going to leave actinic students confused and wanting more.
I disagree.
So the answer to that is that we can offer both, we can keep both kinds of students happy by not ignoring the name of the present perfect. We can be working on the present perfect without naming it. We can say we're talking about things we've done in our lives, things we've done recently, and so on and so on. And then we go, and anyone know what this is called?
Exactly.
And that's the point when you go,
Yeah,
this is the
okay.
present perfect. And
Yeah.
can you work out what its components are? Now look,
Right.
this takes 3 minutes, right?
Meaning and use first,
Exactly,
grammatical,
exactly.
declarative
So
knowledge.
the synoptic learners will go to sleep while you're talking about the nuts and bolts of the past participle. The actinic learners will be writing it all down furiously, and then they'll forget it, which is great. It's fine.
I would absolutely get into bed with that. And I think that is the solution for students where they're being pushed through assessment procedure. And perhaps it also goes back to the point that Gulnara is making about having to do certain things. Focus on the communicative act.
Yeah.
Don't ignore the grammatical knowledge, but make that ancillary to the ability to use it, communicate.
Yeah. Layla's point that I couldn't agree more. Students coming from school can speak or they can talk about the rules, but they can't put a sentence together.
Yeah.
I see that here in southern Italy every single day. I mean, my Italian is fluent, but if we're talking and someone and I say to someone, "Do you speak English?" They say, "Yeah, but but I don't." My doctor, for example, speaks English, but he can tell me what the present perfect is, but he can't put a sentence together. Anyway, yeah, good.
Cool.
Opposite
You're
of synoptic is ectenic, Laura. Ectenic, ECTENIC.
Go back
Welcome.
to praise, Steve. You were wanting
Yes,
Yeah.
as I thought it would, it's just disappeared up the ribbon.
see if I can find
The standard view is that praise is motivating and gives students a sense of worth and blah blah blah. I completely and absolutely. It's about these ideas. I'm simply explaining how I arrived at my approach, and hopefully, with a bit of luck, giving you some ideas about how you might create yours. So for me, praising is having students work for the teacher, and I don't want that ever to happen. I want students. How many times have people said to me, "You need to praise students"? No, I don't. You don't. I've had 5-year-olds who are amazed. Not very many, to be fair, because I haven't taught many 5-year-olds, but perhaps 8, 9, 10-year-olds. But is a better example. I've taught plenty of those, and they say something right, and they look at you, and you go, "Uh huh," and they go, "Okay, all right," and little by little they start to understand. It's never explained, but they just start to understand because of students, of course, will learn how you work as a teacher without really knowing it. It's an unconscious learning that goes on. So the conventions that you set up, including, in my case, not praising, become the deal.
Philip.
Yeah, I was going to jump in here. I'm just wondering whether I can try and offer an opposite kind of case here because
Please do.
I'm feeling Steve's disappeared, but you get from the warm feeling, the nice feeling, um the the exchange that you have with students or students they have between them, and they go away feeling that was a nice personal exchange. It was a nice lesson. We feel good about that.
But that doesn't have
Uh,
to come from
not
praise, does it?
well, depends how we define praise, I suppose. Just kind of, saying, well, yeah, good, you're doing well, mate. You're progressing, everything's going fine. It's all right. I
That's
think
not praise,
learning.
that's recognition.
Oh, okay. Well, to say something's good and we're doing fine, because I appreciate how hard, how long it can take to really progress and develop in learning a second language. And to give people that little bolster of encouragement along the run, along the road. It's like doing a marathon in a way. How long does it take really to master a second language? Sometimes people need a bit of a pat on the back and keep going. You're okay, you're getting there little by little. It's coming, and I have no problem with that really.
Neither do I, but I think we probably do it in different ways. I do it with a nod and a wink and a smile.
Uh-huh.
That's
Yes.
all.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's dangerous to make well, I think two things here. The more I read around motivation, it's actually success that leads to the
Yep.
fulfillment of an intrinsic motivation loop. Students get motivated when they are able to do stuff and they have the evidence. You can praise a student, empty praise rather than genuine praise, time and time again. Oh, well done. Didn't you do well? Well, actually, it was absolute rubbish. And that doesn't actually help.
Yeah.
Anything it
Okay.
hinders.
Yeah.
So I think where we praise students, it has to be for something genuine. And yes, progress and hard work, as well as getting the answer right. But, I think I agree with Steve that, a smile or a thumbs up can be, and some students, teenagers, I've just come off a course working with a whole load of Dutch 13-year-olds at the B2 C1 level. I mean, they were good, but they hated praise. They did not like
Oh,
to be shown what they perhaps felt as being shown up in front of their peers. So sometimes just a very discreet little thumbs up or
Can we shift
actually
just
more.
sideways very slightly and recall that language is for communication, right? Therefore, if one's communication is successful, there's going to be a feedback loop. And that, for me, is the praise. So if we let's suppose we set up I don't know, a shop task or something, I don't know, and someone has to buy a ticket to Glasgow in second class after 10 o'clock at night. And if they get their ticket, then there should be enough sense of achievement in that act without my going along and saying, well done, you. I don't need to do that. They've done it themselves. What I'll do is hang around and give them a wink or a smile or a nod.
Yeah, but Steve, can I jump in on that? Because I mean,
Please do.
in teaching business English, which is a lot of what
Yes.
I do,
Yes.
we've got that big jump between being able to communicate and express your ideas and opinions within a classroom setting, which students can gain the confidence and feel at ease to do that. But then they're out of the classroom into the real world where they have real meetings and negotiations in the business world, and they can clam up, they can shut. And it's trying to get from that, it's almost like a virtual reality classroom where you're practicing and you're playing, but it's not the real thing. And how do we make that jump? I mean, we can try and get our students to take the bull by the horns and say, right, I'm in a real meeting, I'm going to express my opinion, because in their own language they can very well, but it's quite frightening for some people to actually engage in a real business with meeting that's costing, you may be deciding millions of pounds or more,
Yeah.
And in that case, people, was something strange to me about how we get people to go from the virtual reality of make believe, pretending we're in a business meeting, to believe where they really believe that they can do that. And sometimes that needs a bit of help, a little bit of extra encouragement to say you can do it, in your own way, as you say. We all
I,
have our own
I
ways of doing that, but
I would have no problem in saying you can do it. I don't have any problem. What I have a problem with, and it's getting a little bit blown out of proportion, I think, but what I have a slight problem with is teachers who go, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
yeah, okay,
And
Yeah.
that's really what I'm commenting on.
yeah,
That sort of that when praise becomes a kind of an empty comment that's, yes, patronizing. Thank you, Jürgen.
yeah.
Uh, that's really what I'm talking about. So anyway, look, guys, let's move off praise, can we, and go somewhere else. What are people interested in from what's come up today?
Can I, if you think
Yes,
it's the appropriate time to do so,
can.
back to this point, was every time I'm involved in one of these gallery teachers sessions, I keep coming back to task-based learning.
Yeah.
So in terms of Philip's comment about how do you get from what happens in the classroom
Yeah.
to the multi-million dollar, pound, yen business contract. And one of the nice things about good task-based learning is that reflective cycle where the students start reviewing what did they do, how did they do it, and by adding in further reflection and how can you transplant that success into the class, into the out of the classroom, into the business conference room.
Yeah.
But also it strikes me another thing about task-based learning is that it is communicative driven. And going back to your point about the praise is the achievement of the task. Did you get that ticket for the 10:30 train at night or not?
Yeah.
I wonder in terms of, Steve, you were saying in chat, dogme in terms of responding to student interests and need, but task-based learning as well.
Yep.
How was there a process by which your belief in those ways of doing, I'm going to avoid the word method, approach, technique for now, but deliberately. Was there a process by which your approach became aligned with task-based learning and teaching and dogme?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's really what's been going on for the last 40 years, that my approach has been developed largely through, from the moment I was initially trained with Adrian Underhill and all those fabulous people back in 1980. From then on, the approach started to take form, and as I learned about what we'll call methods, because we have to, i.e. silent way in particular, TBL, dogme, Suggestopedia to some extent, though much less, and so on. I began to find that those ideas slotted into my already formed or forming philosophy. That's how it worked for me. It wasn't the other way around. I know for some people it works the other way around, but for me, it was having an idea of what I wanted my classroom to be like, and then discovering that there were things out there that fitted very neatly into that. So, and that really, it goes back to something that Gabby asked way back up there, and I can't even remember, it was quite at the beginning. And she was asking about whether one can have a variety of ideas that became coherent. I think, forgive me if I'm wrong, Gabby. And that is absolutely what has to happen. I don't think that one needs to be a suggestopedic teacher or a silent way teacher. Can be if you want to be, but I don't think you need to be. I think once, and this is why that approach idea is so important, having that overarching idea under which other things can be inserted and developed coherently. And I do think that's important. Does that answer your question? A bit long-winded, sorry.
Philip, what about your journey?
Well, I think it comes down to make the connections there, what Steve's saying, which, yes, I mean, I go along with that. And to me, in a way, it boils down to a question of respect, if I'm not going off at a tangent there. The fact, as a business English language teacher, a lot of my students are professional people. They probably earn 5 times the salary that I do. They're very, very knowledgeable about their own subjects. So it comes back maybe again to a part of a discussion we had earlier, Neil, with being student based. I think it needs to be. They need the English. They know why they need the English in terms of business English, and it's not for going on holiday and going in a restaurant and checking in at a hotel. They have very specific needs for their English, and they decide. And I think more power, more choice that you give to the students, they will tell you, they will direct what they need to go forward and get the language that they're seeking. And I think a lot of that comes down from respect, to actually listening to these people. I learn so much from my students. That's to me the one big perk of the job is what I learn from listening to my students. And I've had it one of my own little sayings for a long time, but students teach and teachers learn. I learn so much from them. They are my teachers. And I think it comes back to dialogue, dogma, past space, all of this interactive exchange. Um, well, that comes down to my particular approach, really, and there may be different methods of how I implement that approach. But most of what I do is based on dialogue and communication, and I'm fascinated. And when it's a group of completely different students from different backgrounds, we become fascinated in learning from each other. It's that sense of inquiry, fascination, exchange. And I
Yeah.
find, like, just here, like we're having now, I can have a lesson like this where discussion just continues. And sometimes I think, oh, look at the time. Whoops, I have another lesson in 20 minutes. I've forgotten. Yeah, I mean, I love it for that reason.
Yeah. Good.
Does that explain, and we've not touched on this, Steve, but that approach, Philip, I think is, whilst the term was linked to method, it strikes me that we're then in the realm of eclecticism. And going back, therefore, to Gabby's point about, do we need an overarching coherence? Is post method eclecticism actually a kit bag of methods which align with an individual approach, which is probably itself dynamic? I'm convinced if I went to teach in Cameroon for a year, what I do now and how I do it particularly would change completely, because I'm not being responsive to the context and the context of the learner. And therefore, what I'm simply doing is bringing out one of those methods out of my kit bag and maybe highlighting it more than I would do in the UK, but they can coexist quite happily. Are we in an eclectic post-method era? Should we be?
I don't like the term post method. I know it's been around for quite a long time now, but I don't. I think what it means is that we don't need to follow a particular strict pathway, and in that sense, I do agree. But I don't like the term because we're still using method. Method is part of what we do. Whether we can put a name to it is another matter. I mean, I don't write lesson plans. I never have. Is that part of a method? I don't know. I don't write the aims of the lesson up on the board. The British Council doesn't like that. But I don't know what the aims are because I mean I've got some ideas, but I don't know where students are going to go.
But that's being intuitive, Steve, and you've developed your intuition to go with the flow over a long
Yes,
time, many, many years of experience. How can
that's
you?
true. But immediately off the training course, Adrian Underhill said to me, "I want you to teach a lesson with no plan," and that's where it all began for me because I thought, "My God, how can I do that?"
I
And
think everyone should do that. Yeah,
everyone should do that.
That's a
yeah.
moment of
It should be
genius.
part of the CELTA. Yes.
Good for you for saying that. Totally agree, Steve.
Good, good. I just want to pick up because this is one of my favorite. Maria Josepa mentioned critical thinking was fine, but not necessary. Now, the problem with critical thinking as a thing is great. I love it, but you have to know about it. And teachers who are not trained in critical thinking don't know about it. It's as simple as that. So if you know about it, if you've studied it, if you've been on a course and or read a book on it and stuff, then please use critical thinking. But most teachers haven't. And therefore, I think that it has become one of those flashy toys that teachers are being seduced by. So it diverts them from the path, if you like. Yeah. Miriam.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. Just for no, because here sometimes the problem I faced is that not all novice teachers know the difference between the three terms that were presented. It means between technique, method, and approach. And sometimes it's difficult to apply one of them or just to choose one. And sometimes because all we care about is that students, after the lesson, they get what they have to get from that lesson, and they understood everything is clear, and that's it. So over time, maybe with experience, this will be better, I guess. So what do you think? Do teachers should know about this from the start or just over time?
Yeah, I do think that they should know about it. But as I said right at the beginning, these three terms have become almost synonymous, which is terribly confusing, especially for new teachers. If you don't know the difference between approach and technique or method and approach, I mean, how can you hope to develop your own thinking in an organized way? So I do think it's important, and I think that senior teachers, as I think you probably are, can do a lot. If training courses are not doing this, because this would take half an hour, to do the difference between these three terms. If training courses are not doing that, then I think it's up to those of us with more experience to take younger teachers and say, do you know the difference between these three terms? And do you know why they're important? And give them a hand, give them a leg up, so to speak.
In the context of where that happens, Steve, I mean, the UK, to an extent, Australia, countries where English is an L1 or the L1, we often have these very short 4 or 5 week courses for right or for wrong. Do you think that if there is a short course context, that it should appear there, or does it appear during the first year of teaching?
No, I think because it's so simple, I think it can very, very easily be inserted into a CELTA or a TESOL. So the beginner level, the entry level courses could easily manage to do this.
Thank you. I'm in the middle of writing one at the moment, so
there we go. Please do something in there.
Wasn't it a starting point, really, to think what is your ideas about teaching, why you're interested in being a teacher, what it means to be a teacher? It's almost square one on the Monopoly board, really.
Absolutely.
Everything develops from there. What do you think and believe? And what's your ideas about teaching?
I think it's the kind of teacher training, teacher development. It's almost analogous with the push to assessment in English language teaching, that we're so focused on getting people through the award or getting them through Cambridge First for Schools proficiency, that we sometimes actually fail to step back and go, hang on a minute, are we teaching you to pass a test, or are we teaching you to develop a communication skill? Are we teaching you to be informed language teachers, or to tick the boxes in a reductionist approach in a CELTA 5 or a CERT TESOL tick list of, can you put people in pairs? Well, actually, we need to be doing both.
Yeah, we do. I think I have when I was training on Trinity Trinity's TESOL, I think I had more fails than any other centre, more fails than any other centre, because I had standards to, and I believe that people should have adhered to them. But I found that people were getting passed who really shouldn't have been passed. Let's not go down this route. It's probably not very useful. But anyway,
And we live in a world where people need certificates, and the world operates often around certificates. And it's a sad thing to say, but often the certificate of a qualification is more important than the knowledge and the ability to communicate, in terms of English language.
So
I suppose part of that initial training course deal is that one has to see one has to balance what people are actually doing during that 4 weeks or whatever it is, and against what their potential is. Can you see potential? Can you grade potential? Anyway, we're moving off a little bit, I think.
And I guess, therefore, almost as a way of concluding, because we're coming to the point where we are at the conclusion time, that we perhaps feel that it is important to get this distinction clarified early on. And if it isn't clarified early on, don't worry about it, don't panic about it, but get informed, talk to your peers, talk to the director of studies or the head of the department, and work on it. But also, in terms of, I mentioned earlier, Prabhu and teacher plausibility, that, don't be frightened to have a degree of faith in your own sense of actually that does seem to make sense, that does seem to be working, but cross-reference it with feedback from peer observation, developmental, not evaluative observation, and have faith in yourself.
Yeah.
And try and develop this overarching sense, because it will inform, and I think essentially what we're talking about is make us all better practitioners. We weed out the stuff that isn't congruent. We work more with the stuff that is congruent with a philosophy. We know from the research that students do better with teachers who are confident in what they do, even when sometimes that might not be quite right. Quite on.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great.